There's a storm brewing. I strongly suggest you slap on your office-issued bulletproof vest, get in the car, and no matter what happens next, stay in the car. My partner and I are about to be fitted with a toe tag if we make those few crucial steps into oblivion. This case will show you how dangerous life in the streets of the murder capital can actually be, without a doubt. The following episode recounts the details of a real homicide investigation. All information presented is taken from public court records, law enforcement files, and direct investigative experience. The names of the victims and individuals involved are used with the utmost respect, and no part of this story is intended to exploit or sensationalize their sufferings. As a retired homicide investigator, I believe these stories matter to honor the victims, to understand the truth, and to bring closure to the families left behind. Some of the names of some of the individuals in this story have been changed. I'll explain the reasons why. Some content may be disturbing to listeners. Discretion is strongly advised. Greetings. I'm Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel. I'm retired from the Camden County Prosecutor's Office Homicide Division. I served my last 11 years in the Homicide Division in the murder capital of the nation. I did a total of almost 28 years in law enforcement and then was a private detective for the next 20 years. The victim in this case was gunned down in the streets of Camden, New Jersey in 1997 by a ruthless killer who I will call Dano Toke. The reason I'm changing his name is because even though he was arrested around 1997, he continues to apply for appeals and motions to the court seeking his early release from prison. The true name of the victim in this case is Eli Rosario, aka Eli. It's true that birds of a feather tend to flock together. Eli was no angel. He was wrapped up in the city with gangs and drug dealers and killers alike. He had a couple of friends, though, that would turn out to be his killers. At some point, he became aware of it. This is a story about the murder of Eli Rosario, and it's also a story that I call a blind date with death. And I do mean blind. I had no idea that my partner, Gary Finneman, a fine detective from the city of Camden who was assigned to assist and work with me on the homicide of Eli Rosario. We had no idea that that case could have ended our careers in a blink of an eye. We're going to start this story where it began for me. It began as a story of a Camden City notorious serial killer by the name of Dano Toke. Dano played both sides of the fence. He came off as a smooth-talking, inner-city black kid that knew the drug world like the back of his hand. He was in fact a drug dealer / murderer, but the police didn't realize that. They enlisted him as a police informant as he supplied information to narcotics units within the county prosecutor's office. He was looking for favoritisms on the street, for police to ignore his real activities. A cold-blooded killer at heart, dealing drugs on the down low. During the 1990s, he had teamed up with another cold-blooded killer by the name of Jose Martinez. Their game plan was to use disguises, masks, scarves, hats, gloves, to never leave fingerprints, and they carried some serious firepower to their dangerous deeds of robbery and threats. Sometimes semi-automatic weapons and also automatic weapons. These boys were no joke. Together, they planned, they connived, and they practiced. And when they felt confident and they felt their plan was airtight, they would move in for the kill. They would rob you, they would threaten you, and if you didn't listen to their orders, you would die on the spot. And if you were a police officer or detective back in that era, it paid you to be cautious and to be careful. You never knew, dealing with people in the city, whether you yourself might become a target of their vengeance. During our investigation of the homicide of Eli Rosario, we became aware of an armed robbery that took place in Pensacola, New Jersey, of Quality Auto. It was an auto dealership there that was targeted by Dano, Martinez, and Rosario. Rosario had fallen ill on that particular day that the robbery was scheduled due to over-drinking the night before. He had a terrific hangover, so Martinez and Dano decided to go on the job by themselves. That case would become a first-degree armed robbery, possession of weapons, and possession of firearms for unlawful purposes. Dana and Martinez masked up, grabbed their weapons, and approached the dealership. The manager, identified as Robert Owens, was approached by a masked man wielding a gun. This was believed to be Dano. He ordered the man at gunpoint, "Give me the cash." Owens gave him $900 from his pocket. The trailer was within a few steps right nearby and was part of the dealership. Once inside the trailer, there stood Martinez, masked and holding 3 women at gunpoint on the floor. Now both masked men were ordering Owens to open the safe. They were being told repeatedly that there was no safe. Martinez then blurts to Dano, "Shoot him, just shoot him." Just at that time, they're surprised by a second man that enters the trailer. His name was Mr. Fells. Mr. Fells is immediately focused on with guns pointed in his chest. Martinez tells him, "Don't be a hero." With that, both gunmen flee. Dano keeps the whole 900 from that armed robbery. After that robbery, Martinez and Dano become involved in a robbery of a bar. 2 men at that bar ended up getting killed. I don't believe that case was ever solved. However, it was during that caper that Martinez learns that Dano was planning to eliminate Martinez and Rosario because they were both witness to the armed robbery of the Quality dealership. Dano was about to be pinched for that job and was in fact arrested for it, and he believed that he needed to eliminate both Rosario and Martinez so as to not bear witness against him. That's what kind of friend we're talking about here, folks. One day you're his friend today, he'll do a robbery with you today, and by the end of the night you might find yourself kissing the canvas with a bullet in the back of your head. When I say these guys were ruthless, that's the kind of people I'm talking about. Fast money from drugs, drug dealing, murders, and beating the police at every turn was their adrenaline. That's what kept them going. Whenever the police would pick up these guys for any type of questioning in any kind of case, you can always count on when their lips were moving, they were lying. To save themselves, to throw someone else under the bus, to tell you about the grand drugs in the sky that they could get for you if only you could let them talk to a narcotics detective so they could keep themselves from going to jail. Forget about it. These guys were stone cold criminals who played every trick in the book. One time during their interactions, Martinez learned that even though Toke was referring to Rosario as his brother, quote unquote, he wanted to kill him on this particular day. Martinez was angry at this point at Dano because during the bar robbery, Martinez also learned that Dano was in fact planning and was being very serious about killing Rosario and Martinez. That didn't sit well with him. Martinez was a streetwise criminal himself, and he knew he had to beat Dano to the punch or he'd be dead before long. On this particular day, he runs into Dano on the street. Dano was on the hunt for Rosario. He's searching, looking. He's armed and dangerous. Later on that same evening, they come across Rosario not far from his home in Camden. Dano walks up to him, friendly, with a smile on his face, with his hand out, reached to hug him, but the other hand carried a very serious firearm. Boom! One shot to the forehead of Eli. Eli hit the ground. Dano stands over top of him and delivers the coup de grace right to the front of his head, punctuating the fact that you ain't getting up from here. You're one dead dog and you're staying there. Interestingly, Martinez isn't shocked by it. After all, he's walking the streets on the prowl with Dano, actually hunting for Rosario, so he knew if they found him, he'd be a dead guy. No question about it. Martinez witnessed this cold-blooded murder, and in his mind at the same time his thought was, that could have been me. I got to take this joker out before I'm next. Now, according to Martinez, it had been Rosario's idea to take Dano out because Rosario was indebted to Tokley over a drug debt. The drug debt was getting old and it was way past due, and he knew it was only a matter of time before Dano took him out. So that's why it became Rosario's idea to get Dano first. It just didn't work out that way. Now, I know listening to this, to my listeners, gets a little confusing. How everybody's out to kill everybody else in all this vicious circle. How do you think we dealt with it? This was our life. This was every day. We had scenarios going on like this. That was what we did for a living. Try to figure this stuff out. Try to sort it out. Try to figure out who's telling the truth. Try to figure out who's next to maybe try to save a life in the meantime here. It was a serious issue and a serious problem. These people were killing people. Somewhere during the hunt for Rosario, while Martinez and Dano were out searching, Martinez comes across information that Dano had influenced Rosario to commit a homicide of a guy who turned out to be the wrong guy. Now, according to Martinez, this was the second reason that Martinez felt justified in wanting to kill Dano, because not only did he know Dano wanted to kill him, he had influenced Rosario about killing an innocent man. Forget about any kind of moral turpitude here. I mean, after all, Martinez just witnessed a cold-blooded murder of a very good friend of his by Dano, who left Rosario lying dead cold on a dark, vacant lot in the city of Camden. Without hesitation, without any remorse, nothing. Just a cold-blooded murder that was witnessed. He knew it was getting time to take Dano out. It wouldn't be long now before Dano would turn his sights on Martinez. The problem with that scenario, fast forwarding here a little bit for you, Martinez ends up going into North Camden and does a shooting of a house. He peppers this house with a hail of gunfire that ends up killing a man that was on the porch of that residence. Martinez doesn't realize it, but he's quickly identified on the scene by persons unknown that he had no idea had seen him commit this murder. I happen to be first out again for that homicide. I do the investigation. I forget who my partner was at the time, but I end up arresting Jose Martinez for that murder. Now, Martinez is sitting in the Riverfront State Prison awaiting trial. I end up pulling him out, doing a few interviews with him on various occasions. I eventually learned, because now he's willing to wheel and deal, that he was an eyewitness to the Eli Rosario murder. Well, Finneman and I are deep into the investigation of Eli's death, and we know that Martinez would roll in those circles with Dano and Rosario, so we pulled him out of jail on a few occasions to interview him. He tells us he was, in fact, an eyewitness to the Eli Rosario murder. In the interim, about 20 feet from the back door where Dano resided in Camden, a barber shop was invaded in broad daylight, if I recall correctly, and at least one victim was shot and killed inside the barber shop. Now, a South Philadelphia homicide detective who had retired after spending 20 years with the City of Brotherly Love, most of it in the homicide division, had finished his career there in Philadelphia and came for a second dose of it and joined the Camden County Prosecutor's Office Homicide Division. His name was Detective Kenny Curcio, a salt-of-the-earth type of guy, steady, cool, calm, collected, and very experienced. These are the kind of guys we needed to help us deal with what we were dealing with in the murder capital of the nation. Kenny ended up catching the barbershop job. Now, at the time, he developed a suspect. Yep, Dano Toke. I looked at the case along with Kenny, and I also became convinced that Dano was, in fact, the shooter. The problem was he couldn't be identified. There was no evidence found other than ballistic evidence, and he just couldn't prove his case. But we knew our suspicions were correct, I'm sure. It just couldn't be proven. We chalked it up as another murder that Dano did, and we always kept our eye out for crimes. He was one of the first names that popped in our heads because he had a very specific MO. Mask up, glove up, disguise up, demand money, and leave a blood trail behind with no survivors, if possible. Once Detective Finneman and I, after compiling everything we had in the Elliot Rosario murder, we decided to go for a warrant. But before we did so, we had some more follow-up information to do, because in our interviews with Dano, of course, he threw all kind of alibi lies out to us that needed to be ran down and investigated. girlfriends, other drug dealers, you name it, he threw it out there. We investigated it. We were able to determine the lies, which led us in a direct finger pointing at our one and only suspect with our eyewitness. Dano Took was our man. I actually went to him and I told him, Dano, it's only a matter of time. We know you killed Eli, and I'm coming for you. I'm just letting you know, buddy. I'm coming for you. Now, during the course of this investigation, shortly after the body of Eli Rosario was removed to the morgue, and once we identified who exactly he was, we went to his home to inform his next of kin that he had been found shot to death in the city. We learned at that time that he lived alone with his elderly mother in a very modest Camden residence. She was a small Hispanic woman with a very soft, mellow, and mild demeanor. She didn't speak very good English, but enough to understand what we were saying. And we understood her. I still remember her crying and holding onto our hands and telling us that she knew her son was out in the streets and there wasn't much she could do to keep him from the violence that city had to dish out. Both Finneman and I felt sorry for the woman, and we tried to comfort her the best we could, but we had to leave. We had a job to do. We had to keep on forging forward. But she left an image in our minds of, that city. It was just bullets flying, mothers crying, and brothers dying. That's what that city was about. And she was a victim herself. Now she lost her only son, at least her only son that we knew of that was living with her. And it was a sad sight and a sad piece of knowledge to carry in our suitcases. We both knew all too well the sad stories of the city, of the mothers, of the fathers, of the loved ones. I don't even want to go there right now. For now, it was time to take this brutal murderer off the streets and snap the cuffs on one Dano for the arrest of Eli Rosario. He was sent to Trenton State Prison, where he is currently serving a life sentence. The year 2000 finally rolled around, and I decided to hang up my gloves and retire. I retired to the country where I was raising a young son with my wife. We had a couple acres of ground. I had purchased a boat, and I had parked it deep in the back of my 100-foot long driveway. It was backed in. I remember it being the political season. I knew that our mayor was running for re-election in the town that I lived in, and I knew that politicians were combing the streets, knocking on doors, trying to speak to residents, giving them their political spiels about voting for them to become the next mayor to overthrow the current mayor. I wasn't into politics at all. I learned at a very early age during my police career, when I first started out actually in the 70s, never mix politics with police work. It's bad business. It had been a couple of years since I retired, I think, maybe less. Could have been a year, I'm not exactly certain. But on this particular beautiful sunny day, I was on my boat in my driveway, working on the interior of it, when a car pulled up to my driveway. I saw it. Two men dressed in suits got out of the car, and without noticing that I was on my boat, walked up to my front door. They were there a couple of moments, returned to their car, turned around in my driveway, and left the area. I thought nothing of it, but I made a mental note for that when I went into the house to check the front door to see if they left any type of political paraphernalia or whatever for me, and for me to throw it away when I got it. Eventually, I go to the front door and I find 2 business cards with 2 names on it from county detectives from North Jersey. Their phone numbers are there. Their identifications was on the front of the cards, and a small note on the back said, "Detective Gavel, at your earliest convenience, give me a call. Important." I thought, oh well, they probably want me for court or an old case or something like that, and I'll give them a shout, see what's going on. Well, I did make the phone call, and I learned that they wanted to meet me. There was some sort of a federal drug case going on in the federal courts involving a couple of heavy hitter drug dealers in the city, and Dano was somehow mixed up into the case. They wanted me to come to court and testify with respect to the homicide investigation and my dealings with Dano during my contact with him over that investigation. I wasn't ready for what I was told next, but what I was told made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, even though it was a couple of years cold by now. I was told that during the interviews of Jose Martinez with these 2 county detectives prepping him for the trial upcoming in the federal courts, that he stated during the Eli Rosario homicide investigation, myself and my partner had went to the home of Rosario. Dano was still on the run, but the investigation was ongoing about Eli's murder. We asked his mother, Rosario's mother, if we could have her permission and would she sign a consent to search form. We wanted to enter her home, specifically to search the bedroom of Elliot Rosario to help us locate any type of clues or information that might be helpful in our death investigation of Eli. Luckily, she stated that she would not permit us to come into her home and search it because we did not have a search warrant, and her son had always told her, if the police come here and they want to ever search our home, don't let them do it. They're not allowed unless they have a search warrant. She looked at us with her little tiny piercing eyes and said, no, she can't let us come in. She said, unbeknownst to you guys, at that time, Jose Martinez and Dano were in her kitchen. They used to cut up their drugs there, and this day was no different. Even though they had just killed her son, they were still using her home as a drug packaging location. They had a couple kilos of cocaine on the table, and Dano was armed with an AK-47. He had told Martinez that if we walk into that kitchen, Dano was going to chop us down right where we stood. We would have had no idea. We would have had no chance, because I don't think our guns would have been drawn when we walked into that home. We had no reason to suspect that anyone would be hiding in it. Now, I'm a realist, and I have to tell you, do I believe that to be in fact a true fact coming from Jose Martinez? Well, he was already sentenced. That's one thing to his favor. But he was still Jose Martinez. He was considered to be a snake with 4 eyes, in our estimation. It wouldn't be the first time he told a story or a lie. Especially, he's talking about Dano, a guy who he knows wanted to kill him. Could he just be adding wood onto the fire? Or could that actually been a true fact? I don't know. Rosario certainly can't tell us. Dano's never going to tell us. He's still in prison, and he's still trying to get out of prison. That's why I'm not using his real name for the purpose of this story. I'm certain I have never even repeated that part of the story to any of my retired homicide friends or even ones that were currently still working. Why? Well, it's not a known, proven fact. We always dealt in true facts. We always dealt with proof. I had no proof that that was true. I would like to believe that it was not true, but believe me, in the back of my mind, I wouldn't doubt it for a second. The people that we were talking about were, in fact, stone-cold killers, one of which was definitely a serial killer. Now, I would never accuse him of killing or targeting a policeman without cold, hard, evidential facts. Because one thing you do have to be in this business is honest. It's everything. When you send a man away for the rest of their natural-born days, or even worse, to a death chamber, you better be sure, and you better have the facts, you better have the evidence to support your allegation of murder. Everything depends on it. You be fair, you be honest, you be thorough, and you be able to sleep at night until you retire. And all these horrible cases start coming back to you in your dreams because you have too much time on your hands. People don't understand why I'm doing this now. I've been retired for 25 years. I still have my hand. This still keeps me in the business. It still keeps me in the job. And in a way, it still keeps me at my desk, doing what I loved, bringing closure, solving homicides. Now, Riverfront State Prison, ironically, is built on grounds that used to be owned by my family. My mother's father owned that property at Front and State Streets in Camden, New Jersey. It was a huge junkyard. It was a staple in North Camden. My grandfather ran it with an iron fist back in the day for many, many years. He was a retired professional boxer and a retired Camden City police officer at one time. He went by the name of Blackjack Mike. As a boxer, he once boxed Leon Lucas, the owner of the famous Donkey's Bar on Kane Avenue in the city of Camden, well known for their cheesesteaks. I can still see him when I used to go visit him at the junkyard, with an Italian stogie cigar clenched between his teeth and squinting through his piercing eyes, and wearing a cap with a wad of money in one pocket and a pistol in the other. He was a tough greaseball, immigrated from Italy back in the day, he and my grandmother. But those days are long gone. I survived one of the toughest cities in the nation, dealing with the underbelly of the worst of the worst. I'm happy I made it through, and my hope is that young, aspiring, wannabe homicide detectives that listen to my stories are able to walk away with some knowledge that they didn't have, some insight that might help them shine a light on the crimes that they have yet to discover and uncover. When you're searching for the wicked, you never know what's going to leap out at you from underneath the rock that you turn over in your search, or the door that you open or crash through in your relentless pursuit of justice. And here's another ironic fact. After I had retired, living out in that country I told you about, I get word that Dano had escaped from state prison. He's on the loose. He returns to Camden. Search teams are out searching for him. They pin him down at his girlfriend's residence in Ablett Village in the city. Once surrounded, he ducks into a closet and removes the floorboard and goes down into the crawl space beneath her apartment and crawled his way, making it to another apartment within the complex, several apartments away from his girlfriend's residence. It's in the middle of the night. The city police have the apartments surrounded with bullhorns. They start evacuating people from the building. Armed and vested, helmeted police officers have a coordinate set up. It's blocked off. He's locked in. He's surrounded. It is my understanding that he asked specifically for me, by name, to be summoned to that scene, and that he would turn himself in to me. I had been the detective that arrested him. The problem with that scenario was I never got a call from the Kansas City Police or the prosecutor's office at the time informing me that that situation had unfolded. Now, it all happened very quickly after that. My understanding was that he was taken into custody without incident and eventually and subsequently returned to Trenton State Prison. I suspect that his request to have me come to the scene was in a fleeting, short moment, and since there was no harm and no danger of him escaping that dragnet, and he was returned promptly to the prison, that there was no need to bother me or contact me, as he was no longer on the loose and he was no longer a threat to society. I get that. I'm actually glad it turned out the way it did in that respect. I would have had to let my family know, and I'm sure that would have been an unsettling situation. All's well that ends well, and I hope it is in fact ended. The end. I'm Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel, retired, Homicide Division, Camden County Prosecutor's Office. We'll see you next time for another episode from the murder capital of the nation.